Moon Hollow was a small valley town tucked so gently between rolling hills that it often felt as if the world forgot it existed. Its cobblestone streets wound through clusters of old houses with slanted roofs and ivy-covered chimneys, and during most of the year it looked like a place built for picture books and warm memories. But there was one night, one single day in all the seasons, when Moon Hollow changed. It was Valentine's Day that turned the cheerful little valley into a place of whispers, shuttered windows, and quiet footsteps. As the holiday approached, the townspeople moved differently. Shopkeepers packed away their trinkets early. Parents brought their children indoors before sunset, and no one decorated with red ribbons or heart-shaped signs like the rest of the world did. In Moon Hollow, anything that looked like a symbol of love was quietly removed, as if the color red itself carried a warning. By the evening of February 14th, lanterns were dimmed, doors were locked, and curtains were drawn so tightly that even moonlight could barely slip through. To an outsider, all this might have seemed dramatic, but to the people of Moon Hollow, it was tradition, older than anyone alive could remember. Whenever someone asked why Valentine's Day was treated with such dread, the answer was usually vague. It's how our grandparents lived, and their grandparents before them. Or, it's better not to disturb old things. No one explained clearly, yet everyone obeyed the unwritten rule. The silence around the holiday was almost sacred, a quiet agreement that some stories were too heavy to speak aloud. Among the people who questioned this tradition was a girl named Mira. She had grown up listening to the hushed warnings her neighbors whispered each February, but her heart was filled less with fear and more with curiosity. Mira loved stories, tales of bravery, mystery, and forgotten legends, and she believed that every strange tradition carried a truth waiting patiently beneath it. Moon Hollow's fear of Valentine's Day felt unfair to her, almost as if the holiday had been wronged somehow. On the morning of the holiday, Mira noticed how different the town felt compared to the rest of the year. The wind itself moved quietly, brushing past rooftops with an eerie softness, and the birds that usually chirped at dawn remained hidden in their nests. Even the sky seemed muted, wrapped in a thin veil of grey. It was a stillness that hung in the air, pressing gently against every door and window. She watched as neighbors hurried indoors, carrying firewood or groceries as though they needed to settle in before a storm. There was no laughter in the streets, no footsteps lingering, no children playing by the fountains. The town square, usually the heart of Moon Hollow, stood empty, its benches untouched and its stone paths cold. Mira stood outside her own home for a long moment, her scarf fluttering around her neck. She felt the strangeness of the day, yet also sensed something almost tender beneath it, as if Moon Hollow was not only afraid but also remembering something heartbreakingly old. The quiet was deep, but not unkind. It felt like a sigh shared by an entire town. Instead of running inside like everyone else, Mira stayed where she was, taking in the hush of the valley. She wondered about the stories people refused to tell. She wondered why love, something celebrated everywhere else, cast a shadow here. And as she stood beneath the soft grey sky, she felt a certainty settle in her chest. The truth behind Moon Hollow's fear was waiting somewhere in the silence, and one day she hoped to find it. As night settled over Moon Hollow, a quiet magic seemed to drift through the valley. Mira, wrapped in her soft woolen scarf, felt a thrill of curiosity spark in her chest. While the rest of the town hid behind shutters and doors, she stepped lightly onto the cobblestone streets. The air was cooler than usual, tinged with a faint sweetness, as if the wind carried the memory of flowers long past. It whispered across rooftops and through narrow alleys, rustling the leaves on the old trees with gentle sighs that seemed almost alive. Mira listened closely, sensing that the whispers were not ordinary sounds. They were soft, careful, and full of longing, like the echo of a story, waiting to be told. The wind circled her feet and swirled around her ankles, carrying with it faint echoes of voices. Mira tilted her head, straining to hear them. The whispers spoke of promises left unkept, of waiting through endless nights, and of a love that had slipped through the fingers of time. The tone was gentle, almost sorrowful, and though it tugged at her heart, it did not frighten her. Instead, Mira felt a quiet invitation, a call to follow. Each turn of the breeze seemed to beckon her forward, deeper into the empty streets where moonlight pooled in silver patches across the cobbles. Mira's steps were slow but steady, her eyes scanning the darkness for shapes that might belong to someone or something beyond the ordinary. Shadows moved with a rhythm of their own, and the trees along the edges of the square seemed to bow their branches as if acknowledging her passage. There was a softness to the night that made it feel alive, like the valley itself was breathing, guiding her toward a secret that had lingered unseen for years. She could almost imagine the wind carrying tiny fragments of laughter, small sighs and messages meant to be delivered long ago, waiting for a patient listener. Then, as Mira approached the edge of the town near the old fountain, the wind thickened, curling around her in a delicate spiral. From the mist, a shape began to appear, soft, luminous, and almost translucent. It had the form of a young woman, her hair like strands of silver moonlight, and eyes that shimmered with a quiet sadness. Mira stopped in awe. The figure raised a hand, almost hesitantly, as if testing whether the human before her was friend or stranger. The voice that emerged was soft, musical, carrying the melancholy of centuries. "I am Eli," it whispered, "and I have waited long for someone who could hear me." Mira's heart beat quickly, but fear did not touch her. Instead, a strange comfort filled her chest, as though she had stepped into a place where lost things could finally be found. The wind swirled around them both, lifting stray strands of hair and carrying the faint scent of roses and damp earth. Mira realized that the whispers were not empty. They were a bridge, a language of longing that reached across time. They were asking to be understood, asking for someone to listen. And Mira, with wide eyes and steady courage, knew in that moment that she would listen, she would stay, and she would hear every word the wind had to share. The night seemed to hold its breath as Mira took a careful step closer, allowing the gentle swirl of the whispering wind to envelop her. In its soft embrace, she felt that the valley, the town, and even the shadows themselves were part of a story much larger than she had ever imagined. A story of waiting, hope, and voices that never gave up, even when no one seemed to notice. The wind wrapped around her shoulders, carrying a message without words, and Mira understood with a quiet certainty that her adventure had only just begun. The night grew deeper, and the silver mist seemed to weave itself into patterns around Mira as she followed the whispers. Elira's soft glow flickered like a candle flame, illuminating a path through the shadow, wedged streets of Moon Hollow that Mira had never noticed before. The figure's presence was comforting, yet filled with a quiet sadness, as if she carried memories too heavy for even the moonlight to lift. Mira felt a mixture of wonder and tenderness, knowing that these memories belonged to someone who had waited far too long for something that never came. Elira began to tell her story in a voice that was at once delicate and unwavering. Long ago, in the very same town, she had loved a young traveller named Rowan. He was brave, cheerful, and full of promises. Before leaving on a long journey, Rowan had written a letter meant to be delivered on Valentine's Day, a note that carried his heart and a promise of return. Elira had waited faithfully, night after night, for the day that should have brought her the letter. But the letter never arrived. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and eventually the passage of years only deepened her longing. The unreceived words had become a shadow upon her heart, one that no sunshine could erase. Mira listened in silence, her fingers curling slightly into the folds of her coat as she imagined the heartbreak that Elira must have carried. There was a tenderness in the story that made it impossible to feel fear. Instead, Mira's mind filled with questions about the letter, where it had gone, how it had vanished, and whether it could still be found. Elira's glow flickered softly, and Mira understood that the spirit herself did not blame Rowan. She only longed to know the truth, to feel the promise fulfilled even after so many years. Moved by a courage she did not know she possessed, Mira spoke. "I will find your letter," she said, her voice steady, though her heart raced. Elira's eyes glimmered with a mixture of relief and surprise, and the wind that whispered around them seemed to pause for a moment, holding its breath. Mira felt the mist sway closer, wrapping around her shoulders like a cloak of encouragement. Somehow the valley itself seemed to sense her resolve, and she felt as if the trees, the cobblestones, and the quiet streets were silently lending her their strength. Elira guided Mira to the old parts of Moon Hollow, places long forgotten by the townspeople, where shadows were soft and the air smelled faintly of pine and dust. Mira could almost feel the weight of time pressing gently upon the streets, carrying the memories of those who had walked there long ago. The whispers of the wind grew stronger, tugging her toward a particular alley, and with each step she felt the story's threads weaving around her heart. This was no ordinary search. It was a quest to restore a promise that time itself had misplaced, and Mira felt honored to be part of it. The night stretched on, filled with silence, punctuated by soft sighs and the occasional rustle of leaves. Mira realized that the letter, wherever it was hidden, held not just words on paper, but a bridge between hearts across time. She imagined Elira's long vigil, a spirit suspended between hope and sorrow, and her own determination hardened into a quiet certainty. Lost things could be found, even after years, and promises, no matter how delayed, could still find their way home. The edge of the forest seemed to welcome Mira with a hushed reverence. The trees stretched high above her, their branches forming a delicate canopy that filtered the moonlight into gentle patterns on the soft earth. Each step she took was quiet, as if even the ground wished not to disturb the secrets hidden beneath the shadows. Elira's glow drifted ahead, guiding her with a soft, steady light, and the whispering wind carried gentle echoes of voices that had long been waiting to be heard. Mira's heart thumped with a mixture of anticipation and wonder. She felt she was about to uncover something extraordinary, something forgotten by time itself. Soon Mira reached the oldest oak tree in the forest, a towering guardian with gnarled roots that seemed to sink into the earth like fingers holding on to memories. Its trunk was wide and solid, carved faintly with symbols that shimmered faintly under the moon's silver glow. The air around the tree felt warmer, charged with a quiet energy that made Mira shiver with excitement. She stepped closer and pressed her palm gently against the bark. The moment her skin touched the rough surface, a soft pulse ran through her fingertips, as if the tree itself were alive and aware of her presence. The wind circled around her, lifting her hair and whispering encouragement in tones too soft for ordinary ears. Slowly, the trunk of the oak shifted, revealing a hidden hollow just large enough for Mira to peer inside. Dust motes danced in the pale light that spilled from within, and the air smelled faintly of old parchment and earth. Inside lay a collection of objects that had been forgotten by the world. Rolled scrolls, tied with ribbons, faded to soft pastels, a wooden box with delicate carvings, and papers yellowed with age. Mira's fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the box. It was adorned with the initials RH, and even through the years it seemed to hum with a gentle warmth, as if it held more than mere words. Carefully, she lifted the lid. The letter inside was folded neatly, its paper untouched by the passing of time. Mira could see the handwriting immediately, strong, tender strokes that seemed alive even in ink. Her heart beat faster as she read the words aloud softly, almost afraid to disturb the magic of the moment. Rowan's letter spoke of devotion, of a promise to return, and of a love that would endure despite distance, time, and circumstance. Each sentence carried the warmth of a heart that had waited patiently and sincerely, and Mira felt tears gather in her eyes at the thought of Elira's long vigil. The wind swirled around her, lifting strands of hair and carrying the faintest scent of roses through the hollow. Mira realized that this hidden treasure was more than a letter. It was a key to healing a heart that had waited far too long. The oak tree seemed to settle, as if satisfied that the letter had finally been found. In that quiet moment beneath the old branches, Mira felt the weight of the past gently lift, leaving only the delicate promise of hope. Somewhere in the silence of the forest, she knew a spirit was listening, finally ready to hear the words that had travelled through time. The forest seemed to exhale a quiet sigh as Mira held Rowan's letter in her hands. The mist swirled around her like a delicate veil, sparkling in the soft light of the moon, and she could feel a subtle warmth spreading through the air, almost as if the valley itself were aware of the discovery. Elira appeared beside her, her glow brighter and steadier than ever before. Mira noticed that the gentle light surrounding Elira no longer trembled with sadness, but shimmered with something new, an aura of peace, of long-awaited relief that had been buried beneath centuries of longing. Elira reached toward the letter, her translucent fingers brushing against the paper with reverence. The words she read aloud were soft, like a gentle song floating in the night, yet each syllable carried the power of years spent waiting, of love preserved even when unseen. Mira watched quietly, her heart full, as the spirit's form seemed to solidify a little more with each word, becoming warmer, more real, as though the fulfillment of a promise could shape her into the person she had been meant to be all along. The wind wrapped itself around them, carrying a faint scent of old roses and earth, whispering its own approval. As Elira finished reading, a serene smile spread across her face. There was no longer a trace of longing or sorrow in her eyes, only a quiet, radiant calm. Mira felt the letter's magic, a bridge connecting past to present, hearts across time, and a spirit finally released from the burden of waiting. Elira's voice, soft and melodic, drifted across the clearing. "Thank you," she said. "You have returned what was lost. You have given me what I have waited for." The words hung in the night like gentle music, and Mira realized that in that moment she had become part of something far larger than herself. A story of patience, devotion, and hope that had outlasted time itself. The mist swirled more intensely for a moment, lifting from the forest floor like silver ribbons dancing in the moonlight. Mira could feel Elira's presence enveloping her in warmth, a sensation that was both comforting and humbling. There was a softness in the air now, a peaceful quiet that was different from the tense stillness of the earlier night. Even the trees seemed to bow gently in acknowledgement, their leaves whispering softly as though celebrating the fulfillment of a promise too long delayed. Every sound, from the gentle rustle of the undergrowth to the distant call of a night bird, seemed to carry a note of joy. Elira's figure began to glow even more brightly, radiating a gentle luminescence that made Mira blink in wonder. "I can rest now," Elira whispered, almost like a lullaby carried by the wind. "My story can finally be told in peace." Mira held the letter close, feeling a warmth that was both physical and emotional, knowing that she had helped heal a wound that time had struggled to close. There was a quiet satisfaction in the night, the kind that fills the heart with calm and makes the world feel gentle and safe. As Elira's glow slowly faded into a soft shimmer that raged with the moonlight, Mira realized something important. Sometimes the simplest act of listening, the smallest courage, can restore what has been lost for generations. In that serene forest clearing, with the wind whispering softly and the old oak standing tall, Mira felt a deep sense of connection between past and present, spirit and human, longing and fulfillment. And in that quiet moment, she knew that love, patience, and hope had finally found their way home. Morning sunlight filtered softly through the misty trees as Mira walked back toward Moon Hollow, Rowan's letter safely folded in her hands. The valley felt different now, as if the night had been a quiet rehearsal for something bright and new. The air was warmer, carrying the faint scent of early blooms, and even the old cobblestones beneath her feet seemed to hum softly with anticipation. Mira could sense that the magic of the previous night lingered, a gentle promise woven into the very atmosphere. She realized that the story of Elira's waiting had not ended simply with the discovery of a letter. It had awakened something more profound, a hope that could now touch the hearts of everyone in the town. As she entered the town square, Mira noticed small, subtle changes. Windows that had been shuttered for generations reflected the morning sun with a soft sparkle, and the lanterns that had remained unlit during Valentine's Day now seemed eager to glow. Even the flowers along the edges of the square had begun to bloom in soft, cheerful clusters, their petals catching the light as though they had been waiting to shine all along. Mira could hear faint murmurs of curiosity from the townspeople, who cautiously peeked from behind doors and curtains. The air was lighter, and with each step she took, it felt as if the town itself was beginning to breathe again, after a long and quiet pause. Only on the fountain in the square, and she noticed a gentle shimmer rising from it. Though no one could see Elira, Mira felt the spirit's presence as clearly as the warmth of the sun. "Valentine's Day is meant for hope," Mira whispered aloud, a smile touching her lips. "It is meant for connection, for love that endures, and for the promises we keep, even across time." The wind responded with a soft swirl, lifting stray petals and carrying them across the square like tiny messengers of joy. Mira's heart felt full. She had been part of something extraordinary, a gentle healing that reached beyond what anyone could immediately see. Throughout the day, people began to emerge from their homes with cautious wonder. Children ran to the fountain, their laughter ringing softly, while parents watched with tentative smiles. Even the elders of Moon Hollow, who had spent decades avoiding Valentine's Day, stepped outside and paused to feel the subtle warmth in the air. Mira understood that the town's fear had not vanished instantly, but it was softened, replaced with a quiet curiosity and a willingness to embrace the day with open hearts. The spirit's story had reminded them all that love could be gentle, enduring, and safe. Mira stood beneath the old oak at the edge of the square, glancing up at its sturdy branches that had witnessed generations of hidden stories. She could feel Elira's gratitude in the soft breeze that rustled through the leaves, and a sense of completion settled around her. Valentine's Day, which had once been shrouded in fear and mystery, was now touched with light and promise. It was no longer a day of whispers and shadows, but a day that could be celebrated openly with hope and joy. Mira knew in the quiet of her heart that the valley had been given a gift, the chance to see love not as something frightening or uncertain, but as something that could heal, inspire, and bring people together. And as the sun climbed higher, bathing Moon Hollow in a warm golden glow, Mira smiled. The promise of a new Valentine's Day had begun, not just for her, not just for Elira, but for the entire town. It was a day that could finally be remembered for joy, connection, and the gentle magic that comes from listening, caring, and keeping faith. That even the oldest stories could end happily. The first light of morning spread softly across Moon Hollow, painting the valley in hues of gold and rose. The streets, once quiet and sombre, now seemed to glow with gentle warmth. Children's laughter floated through the air, mixing with the songs of birds that had returned to the treetops, and the faint scent of blooming flowers carried promises of new beginnings. Mira walked through the town square with a heart lightened by wonder, carrying Rowan's letter carefully folded in her hands. The town felt alive in a way it had not for generations, as if every stone, tree, and flower had been waiting for this morning to arrive. The townspeople had emerged from their homes slowly, cautiously at first, then with growing smiles. Faces that had known fear and hesitation now shone with curiosity and delight. People spoke in hushed, joyful tones, sharing stories and laughter that had been missing for years. The square, once still and cold on Valentine's Day, was now filled with movement, colour, and warmth. Even the old oak at the edge of the fountain seemed to stand taller, its branches stretching gently into the sky as though bowing to the sun. Mira felt a soft breeze brush against her cheeks and imagined it was Elira whispering a quiet thank you from wherever her spirit now rested, free at last. Mira set Rowan's letter on the fountain once more, allowing it to rest where all could see. Though Elira was gone, her presence lingered in the shimmer of the air, in the whispering wind, and in the soft light that danced across the cobblestones. Mira could feel the magic of the letter still unfolding, touching each person who came near. She realized that the letter's power had never been simply about words on paper. It had been about hope, connection, and the courage to believe that love, no matter how long delayed, could heal and bring peace. Families gathered in the square, children chasing petals carried by the breeze, while elders shared stories of times long past. The townspeople exchanged gentle smiles and quiet laughter, discovering the joy that comes from being together and from embracing the day with open hearts. Even the shadows that had haunted Moon Hollow's Valentine's days seemed to soften, blending into the warm light of the morning. Mira watched the scene unfold with a quiet sense of pride and contentment. She had listened, she had acted, and in doing so she had helped restore not just a spirit, but an entire town's sense of hope. As the sun climbed higher, casting a golden glow over rooftops and gardens, Mira paused beneath the old oak tree. She placed a hand on its sturdy trunk, feeling the calm strength it had always held. The valley, once filled with whispers of sorrow and longing, was now alive with laughter, song, and gentle light. Mira understood that every Valentine's Day from now on could carry the warmth, joy, and promise she had helped awaken. In that quiet, radiant morning, Mira smiled, feeling the soft presence of Elira in every breeze, in every blooming flower, and in the hearts of the townspeople. Moon Hollow had been transformed, not by magic alone, but by courage, care, and the power of listening to a story that had waited a very long time to be heard. And with that knowledge, Mira walked through the town, her heart light, knowing that the love, hope, and light of this new dawn would guide Moon Hollow for many Valentine's days to come.